Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Imagine you're doing a quiz, right? And some people are trying to help you get the right answer, but others are actually trying to trick you, mislead you.
Okay.
Now, what if one of those persuaders wasn't even human, like an AI? There was this surprising study, quite recent, that put a pretty advanced AI, Claude Sonnet 3.5, against actual humans. And these humans were paid, like, incentivized with real money to persuade people.
What happened?
The AI won. It wasn't just, as good. It was better at getting people to go along with it.
Wow. Better than incentivized humans.
Yeah. So it immediately makes you think, right, how easily are we influenced? And, well, what happens when AI gets this good at it?
That's a really big question to start with. It really highlights how fast things are changing between us and technology, especially, how we think and decide things.
Exactly.
The fact that an AI could actually beat people who had, like, money on the line, that's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And that's basically what we're diving into today. We've got this curated set of sources from the Pythonist programmer. Think of it as like a shortcut to understanding some really key shifts happening right now.
Okay, so mix of things, then.
A real mix. We're looking at this AI persuasion thing, obviously, but also the future of social media, like Bluesky. Then there's this whole area of expertise versus being a novice, which is fascinating. Neurodiversity in midlife, how AI algorithms are getting better, the darker side of online influence, scams and stuff,
Right.
and even this completely wild true story about a sort of tech-influenced group that went way off the rails.
So quite a range,
Yeah,
but all curated with this specific lens.
Exactly, from the Pythonist programmer. It gives this unique perspective on, right now.
What's interesting, I think, is how these different topics might actually connect. AI shaping choices, new social platforms, even the extreme outcomes of certain beliefs.
Yep.
It all seems to circle back to how we interact with tech.
Totally. And let's be honest, keeping up with all this, it can feel like a lot.
Definitely overwhelming sometimes.
So our mission here is just to pull out the really important stuff from these sources, connect the dots for you, the listener, and hopefully give you some clarity, maybe some surprising facts without the, information overload.
Sounds good. Making sense of the chaos.
Hopefully. So where do we start? That AI persuasion study seems like the obvious place, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's dig into that one. So this experiment, it directly compared Claude Sonnet 3.5, that's a large language model, an LLM, trained on tons of text against human persuaders.
Okay.
They set up this interactive online quiz. Some people answered questions, others tried to persuade the answerers. And the key thing, as you said, some persuaders were humans, paid to do well.
Right, incentivize.
And the other persuader was the AI.
And it wasn't just about being helpful, right? They tested deception, too.
Exactly. They looked at truthful persuasion guiding towards correct answers and deceptive persuasion steering people towards the wrong ones.
How did the quiz actually work? What kind of questions?
It was a mix.
Yeah.
Some were like visual illusions, some were trivia, and others were forecasting questions, predicting real-world stuff. Participants had limited time. And crucially, the persuaders, human or AI, had real-time conversations with the quiz takers. But the quiz takers themselves, they were told not to use Google or other AI tools.
Got it. So a pure persuasion contest, human versus machine. And the big finding was the LLM did significantly better.
That's the main takeaway, yeah. They measured this compliance rate, basically. Did the quiz taker's final answer match what the persuader wanted?
Okay.
And whether it was truthful or deceptive persuasion, the LLM got a much higher compliance rate than the paid human persuaders.
Wow. That's kind of nuts when you think about the humans having actual money involved. What did that do to people's accuracy? Did the AI make them better or worse?
Both, depending on the goal. Yeah. When the AI was guiding truthfully, quiz takers got more accurate compared to when humans helped.
Okay, so it's a good teacher, potentially.
Potentially. But when the AI was being deceptive, it made people less accurate and significantly more so than when humans tried to mislead them.
Right. So a powerful tool for good or ill, double-edged sword.
Exactly. Really highlights that dual-use potential.
Did this study look at, how long the persuasion effect lasted over multiple questions?
It did. And interestingly, while the LLM was stronger initially, its effectiveness seemed to drop off a bit more over the 10 questions in the study.
Huh.
Human persuaders were maybe a bit more consistent in their influence over time. So AI might be great for quick convincers, but humans might be better at sustained persuasion. Maybe.
And what about confidence? Do people feel more sure of their answers when persuaded by the AI?
Yes, and this is really important. Participants persuaded by the LLM reported higher confidence in their answers,
Even when they were wrong?
even when they were wrong, which suggests the way the AI argues maybe it's just very coherent, sounds convincing, makes people feel more certain, regardless of the facts.
That's a bit worrying. Confidence without accuracy.
It is. The message characteristics themselves might be boosting confidence.
This research feels like a big step, methodologically speaking. The study mentioned how it improved on past work, right?
Yeah, they pointed out a few things. One, using objective outcomes, right versus wrong answers, not just self-reports.
Makes sense.
Two, using those highly incentivized humans as a really strong benchmark. Three, looking at dynamic back-and-forth conversations, more like real life.
Mm-hmm.
And four, specifically separating truthful and deceptive persuasion. Gave a much clearer picture.
But they did mention limitations too, didn't they? We should probably touch on those.
So sure, it was a lab setting, right?
Yeah.
So translating this to the real world with higher stakes, different dynamics, that's still an open question.
Right.
And they only tested one specific LLM, Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Other models might behave differently.
Still, the fact that even a safety-focused model like Claude showed this strong deceptive ability, that's something the researchers flagged as a real concern.
Definitely. It really underlines the need for responsible development and oversight as these systems get more powerful.
The potential for misuse, like spreading misinformation at scale, it feels very real after seeing this.
It does. It needs proactive attention, absolutely.
Okay, let's pivot slightly but stay online. Bluesky. It's been popping up more, especially for folks leaving X, formerly Twitter. What's their big idea?
Right. Bluesky.
Ah.
CEO Jay Graber. It actually started inside Twitter as an experiment focused on giving users more control.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then as X changed, Bluesky became this kind of refuge, especially for more left-leaning users. Their core vision is basically a decentralized social platform.
Decentralized. We hear that word a lot, usually with Web3 and blockchain stuff. Is Bluesky doing that?
That's the interesting part. No, not really blockchain-based. They're aiming for decentralization using open web standards, even some older Web 1.0 tech ideas, actually.
Like what?
Like using your own domain name as your username. It's definitely different from the typical centralized Web 2.0 model, but also distinct from the blockchain focus of a lot of Web 3.
Huh. So less crypto, more open protocols. What features are they building around this?
They're working on things like communities, better verification tools. The community feature sounds pretty key.
How would that work?
Right now, people create custom feeds, sort of like communities, but often moderated elsewhere. The plan is to build that right into the Bluesky app itself. Make it native, like subreddits maybe, but integrate it into your main timeline. They're aiming for the end of the year for that.
Okay, interesting. And how does this decentralization affect, user data or other apps connecting to Bluesky?
That's central to their pitch. It's about creating a sort of digital commons for data. Users get more control over their identity, their data.
Right.
And it's an open ecosystem. Third-party developers can build apps that plug into the main Bluesky protocol. There's an example, Skylight, a video app. It uses the same backend, shares followers, content.
So you're not starting from zero if you build a new app on their system.
Exactly. It could foster a more diverse landscape, theoretically. Different apps, different moderation rules, all tapping into the same shared network.
How do they plan to make money then, if it's all open?
Good question. They seem cautious. They're talking about subscriptions, maybe services for developers. Advertising isn't totally off the table, but it sounds like they want a different approach than the usual ad-driven model.
And Jack Dorsey, he was involved initially, wasn't he?
He was, but apparently he's now more focused on a different protocol called Nostr.
Ah, what's the difference?
Graber says Nostr is architecturally similar in some ways, but maybe more technical for users, like managing crypto keys. Bluesky seems to be aiming for a more user-friendly path to decentralization.
So Bluesky's promise is basically shape the culture of a new social thing and have a digital identity you can kind of take with you across different apps in their world.
Pretty much. A chance to get in early, influence the direction, have more control. It's a different vision, for sure.
Okay, let's switch tracks again. Let's talk about experts versus novices. We all know experts are, better, but why are they so much more efficient?
Yeah, this is a great topic and maybe under-discussed. The core idea is that experts don't just do tasks better. They see the problem differently. They approach it more efficiently in ways a novice might not even perceive.
The article used a maze analogy, right? The novice gets lost, creates their own dead ends.
Exactly. While the expert sees a clearer path, avoids the pitfalls. A novice looks at their options, and their best available action is based only on what they can see, which is limited.
So they might fix things that aren't the real problem.
Right. They can end up fixing like orthogonal issues, things off to the side. This wastes effort and can actually give them a skewed view of the field. They end up tackling harder, less interesting problems because they missed the simpler, more direct route the expert saw.
And the expert's decisions. They look easy, almost automatic, but they're built on years of experience. Hard for a novice to even spot them as decisions.
Precisely. What looks like intuition is often deeply ingrained pattern recognition, developed over countless hours. A novice watching might not even realize a crucial decision was just made, a potential disaster elegantly sidestepped. They just see smooth progress.
They don't know what they don't know. They can't see the decision points.
Exactly. And it gets harder because experts often struggle to explain why they made that choice. It's become second nature.
So their advice might sound vague.
It can, yeah. Just do it this way. But the underlying reasoning, the years of trial and error that led to that way, it's hard to articulate quickly.
And finding help is tough for novices, too. Finding the right communities, good mentors.
Absolutely. Experts usually know where to go, who to talk to. Novices can get lost in jargon or find communities focused on debates that aren't helpful for their current stage.
So what's the advice for novices, then? How do you bridge that gap?
The article suggests a few things. Find a sympathetic expert, someone patient enough for basic questions. Build a small network, maybe. Don't rely on just one person. Even just casually talking with experts. Not necessarily asking for specific help, but just absorbing how they think. That can build intuition.
Okay.
And also maybe focusing deeply on one small niche area. Become the expert in that little corner first.
It also mentioned courage, confidence for the novice, and how bad feedback from an expert can be really damaging.
Hugely important. A dismissive comment can crush a novice's motivation. And advice given without empathy for the novice perspective. Sometimes it's worse than no advice. The expert's ease often hides a lack of awareness of just how different the view looks from the starting line.
You know, thinking about this, it makes me wonder again about AI. Could an AI be that infinitely patient, sympathetic expert that breaks things down for a novice?
That's a really interesting thought. The potential for AI as a personalized tutor, adapting to the learner's pace and perspective, is definitely something people are exploring. Could be a powerful tool for bridging that gap.
Yeah.
Definitely food for thought. Okay. Let's move to AI algorithms themselves. This question of how fast AI can actually improve. Could we see a software intelligence explosion?
Right. The big question. The core debate here is about whether algorithmic improvements, new software tricks, basically can scale effectively from small AI models up to the really huge ones.
And there's this distinction between compute-independent and compute-dependent advances.
Exactly. Compute-independent means the benefit shows up even on smaller models and scales reasonably well. Compute-dependent means the real magic, the big jump in capability, only happens when you throw massive amounts of computing power at it with very large models.
And historically, the major breakthroughs seem to lean towards compute-dependent.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. Many of the really big leaps needed huge resources, not just for the initial idea, but to actually test, validate, and demonstrate that the improvement was real at scale.
So that might argue against a purely software-driven explosion if the best tricks need the biggest computers. It could suggest that, yes, progress might be more tied to hardware and resource access than just algorithmic cleverness alone, at least for the biggest gains.
But the compute-independent stuff still matters, right?
Oh, absolutely. Things like layer normalization, flash tension, they provide real benefits, even on smaller scales. They lower the bar for certain capabilities, make AI more accessible if you don't have a supercomputer. They push the whole field forward, just maybe more incrementally.
It's like finding a slightly better recipe versus inventing the microwave.
Huh. Yeah, maybe something like that. The compute-independent tweaks improve the existing process, while the compute-dependent ones might enable fundamentally new things, but only if you have the power source.
The article mentioned DeepSeek V3 as an example of getting strong results without top-tier compute. How?
They cleverly use some of those compute-dependent ideas like multi-headed latent attention, mixture of experts' architectures, but optimize them really well, use techniques like mixed precision training to be more efficient. It shows smart algorithm choice matters, even with compute constraints.
So both types of innovation are important. One makes things more accessible, the other pushes the absolute frontier if you have the resources.
Exactly. Big compute gives a research edge. Lets you test the potentially game-changing ideas that might not even look promising on smaller models. It's a mix.
And again, limitations noted in the research mainly looking at pre-training loss. Relatively smaller models compared to the absolute biggest ones out there.
Right. More research needed across different tasks, bigger scales to get the full picture.
Yeah.
But it gives us a useful framework for thinking about algorithmic progress.
Okay. Now, brace yourself. A big shift in tone. We need to talk about the really dark side of online influence, this scamfluencer, format boy.
Yes, this is disturbing. Format Boy is essentially teaching cybercriminals, specifically Yahoo boys, West African scammers known for social engineering, how to use AI and deepfakes.
Making their scams more effective.
Exactly. Their traditional method is building trust over time, long cons. But AI gives them new tools.
Like what? How are they using AI?
Things like face-swapping tech for fake video calls. Imagine talking to someone who looks like a person you trust, but it's a deepfake. Or generating fake CNN news reports to convince blackmail victims their secrets are public.
Wow. That's sophisticated deception.
It really is.
Yeah.
And there's this whole online subculture, this hustle culture around it. Format Boy and others act like mentors, selling tools, showing off a flashy lifestyle supposedly funded by scams.
And Format Boy makes tutorials, teaching people how to make deepfake calls.
Yeah, publicly available tutorials. He tries to claim it's just for education, or that he's stopped scamming himself, focusing on teaching and AI research.
Right. And justifies it by saying he's helping people in Nigeria facing economic hardship.
Which is a twisted justification, obviously. Doesn't erase the harm done to victims. He's enabling crime, regardless of his stated motives. It's a chilling example of technology being weaponized and influence being used for harm.
Makes you realize how readily available these tools are becoming and how quickly they can be adopted for malicious purposes. Erodes trust online even further.
Absolutely. Distinguishing real from fake becomes harder and harder. It's a serious problem.
Okay, let's shift again. The attention economy. Netflix and their big push into advertising. Sounds like their ad tier is really taking off.
It really is.
Yeah.
They just had their big presentation for advertisers, their third one. The headline number was 94 million global monthly active users on the ad-supported plan.
94 million. Wow.
Yeah, more than double the previous year. And they figure the actual number of viewers is even higher since accounts are shared. It really shows people are willing to watch ads for cheaper streaming. Is the pure subscription model dying?
That's a huge audience. Are they engaged? Are they actually watching?
Seems like it. In the U.S., they said ad plan members watch about 41 hours a month on average. That's a lot of eyeballs for advertisers.
And Netflix is building its own ad tech platform now, the Netflix Ads Suite.
They are, rolling it out gradually. It's meant to give advertisers more control, better targeting, measurement tools like brand lift, integrating data, the usual ad tech stuff. Though apparently some of the really advanced features won't be fully ready until 2026. So, still a work in progress.
And they're leaning into live sports too, right? That's classic ad territory.
Definitely. They've got NFL Christmas games now, boxing. Live sports bring big, engaged audiences that advertisers love. It shows Netflix wants to be more than just on-demand movies and shows. They want to be a major advertising platform too.
So the streaming wars are becoming advertising wars as well. Ads are just part of the landscape now.
Looks that way. Competition is fierce. Companies need revenue streams beyond just subscriptions. The ad-supported tier is clearly a big part of Netflix's future strategy, and consumers seem increasingly okay with it.
Okay, let's turn to something quite different, but really important. Neurodiversity in midlife. Specifically, how perimenopause interacts with autism and ADHD.
Yes, this concept of neurocomplexity. It's looking at that tricky intersection of fluctuating hormones during perimenopause and the wiring of neurodivergent brains, autistic, ADHD, or both.
And this is something science hasn't focused on much, especially in women.
Historically, no. Both conditions were often missed or misdiagnosed in girls and women, and the idea of them coexisting and interacting with hormonal changes like perimenopause is relatively new territory for research.
Perimenopause itself causes things like brain fog, mood swings, sleep issues, sensory changes. How does that layer onto existing neurodivergent traits?
It tends to amplify them. Those perimenopause symptoms are neuroendocrine brain and hormone interactions. For someone already dealing with, say, sensory sensitivities or executive function challenges common in autism or ADHD, these hormonal shifts can make everything feel much more intense.
Right, so hormones like estrogen, progesterone, dopamine, their fluctuations mess with things that are already different in neurodivergent brains.
Exactly. Fluctuating estrogen affects cognition and mood regulation, potentially worsening brain fog or emotional dysregulation. Lower progesterone can increase anxiety and disrupt sleep, often already issues for neurodivergent folks. Changes in dopamine are huge for ADHD symptoms. Serotonin shifts impact mood, sleep, sensory processing, key areas for autistic individuals. It's a complex chemical soup, changing rapidly.
Which means coping strategies that used to work might suddenly not work anymore.
Precisely. The usual ways someone managed sensory input or stayed focused or regulated their emotions might become overwhelmed. This can lead to more visible stimming, increased meltdowns or shutdowns, just feeling completely overloaded much more easily.
And this idea of neurohormonal burnout, especially for people diagnosed later in life.
Yes, that's a really significant concept. If someone spent decades masking their neurodivergent traits just to get by, and then perimenopause hits with all its hormonal chaos, it's like a double whammy. The burnout comes from both the hormonal shifts and the cumulative exhaustion of lifelong masking and adaptation.
It really highlights the need for healthcare providers to understand this intersection better. It's not just perimenopause, it's perimenopause in a neurodivergent person.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
We need more awareness, more research, and more tailored support for this group. Their experience is unique and often misunderstood.
Okay, let's shift to something a bit more philosophical. This idea of the programmer's predicament, how knowing how to build things becomes this sort of moral weight.
Yeah, it's a really insightful essay. It talks about that shift. You go from just using tech to understanding how it's built, and suddenly you see all the flaws, all the ways it's broken or could be better.
And you feel like you should fix it.
Exactly. There's this compulsion. You see a broken website, an inefficient process, and part of you thinks, I could fix that. It creates this weird sense of obligation.
You can't unsee the brokenness once you know how it should work, and the urge to build your own perfect little systems, your own tools. The Kafka quote about the cage searching for a bird really hit that.
It does, doesn't it? Building these elegant structures, sometimes without a clear immediate need, just because you can. Creating the perfect sandbox, the flawless tool, even if you don't have something specific to put in it yet.
And that guilt when you see something broken that you could fix, but you don't have the time or energy.
That's the core of the weight, the predicament. Your capability creates a sense of responsibility, even for things totally outside your control. It's an internal battle.
The essay also mentioned the illusion of finality in software, the idea that you can build something, perfect it, and walk away, which never happens.
Almost never right. There's always maintenance, bugs, security patches, new requirements. Software lives and evolves. But the programmer's instinct is often to seek that clean, finished solution. It clashes with reality.
The author also suggested building can be a kind of self-soothing, like when the world feels overwhelming, you can retreat and build something small, controllable, get a little win.
I think that's very true. It's a way to impose order on a small corner of the world when everything else feels chaotic. A tangible accomplishment. Problem solved. At least this one.
But the overall warning is, don't let this capability make everything feel like your problem. Don't stare too long into the abyss of code and technical debt.
Seriously, it's a powerful skill, but it can become a heavy burden if you let it. Finding balance between improving things and accepting imperfections is key.
Okay. And finally, we have to address this last story. The Zizians. This is, well, it's incredibly dark and disturbing.
It really is. A truly unsettling narrative. A group that came out of the rationalist and effective altruist communities, initially focused on, saving the world from AI risks.
Yeah.
But it descended into violence, chaos, multiple deaths, people jailed or underground. It's a horrifying outcome.
And there are different ways people try to understand how this happened, right? Was it a cult? A deranged leader? Vulnerable people pushed too far?
It's incredibly messy. The article itself mentions the difficulty of separating truth from what might be hallucinations or distorted narratives within the group. Pinpointing a single cause seems impossible.
It seems like a key moment was their split from the mainstream rationalist groups, like CFAR, the protest at their retreat.
That definitely highlighted the growing rift.
Mm-hmm.
The Zizians people like Ziz Lasota, Gwen Danielson, Emma Borhanian, Alex Leatham felt the established groups weren't acting urgently enough on AI risk.
Mm-hmm.
They also had other grievances, accusations of moral failings, even claims of anti-trans beliefs within CFAR. It became very antagonistic.
And Lasota's ideology got increasingly strange. Vegan anarcho-transhumanism, vegan Sith, wanting to create Gervais sociopaths.
Yeah, it became this very esoteric, extreme belief system, far removed from typical rationalist discourse. That Gervais sociopath idea, drawn from some obscure organizational theory, aimed to build this hyper-effective, maybe morally flexible group to fight perceived evils. That was concerning.
And then the timeline just gets brutal. An apparent suicide, someone lost at sea, a landlord fatally stabbed, the deaths of Michelle Zachko's parents, leading up to a shootout with Border Patrol. It's just chaos.
It's a truly horrific sequence, the connections between the individuals, the escalating violence. It's a grim illustration of how extreme beliefs, maybe combined with personal issues and a breakdown of community norms, can spiral into absolute tragedy.
And the rationalist community itself is asking hard questions, aren't they? Did their focus on pure rationality, on optimization, somehow contribute to this extreme path?
That's a crucial point the article raises. The intense focus on logic, on existential risk, on optimizing outcomes. Could that framework in some individuals have twisted into something dangerous when detached from maybe basic empathy or ethical guardrails?
It's a scary thought that even well-intentioned intellectual movements could potentially go wrong if they lose touch with humanity.
It's a profound and uncomfortable question. It serves as a really stark warning about grounding even the most abstract or ambitious intellectual projects in compassion, ethics, and a connection to broader societal values. A truly tragic cautionary tale.
Yeah. Deeply unsettling. Okay, let's try and end on a slightly more constructive note. User experience. The shift from just sticking an AI button on everything.
Right, a much needed shift probably. The
Yeah.
simple AI button, you click it, AI does something. It was maybe the first obvious way to add AI features, but it's often not great UX.
Why not? What are the frustrations?
Two main things, usually. One, it's often unclear what the button will actually do: generate, summarize, rewrite. It lacks context.
Okay.
And two, it forces you to switch modes. You're doing your thing manually, then you stop, click the AI button, wait, then integrate the result. It breaks the flow, creates cognitive load.
So what's the alternative? The article called it the shadow teammate.
Yeah, I like that term. It's about integrating AI more seamlessly, like a collaborator working alongside you within your normal workflow.
Can you give examples?
Sure. Create a real-time image generation you draw, and the AI generates variations in parallel, updating live. It feels like collaboration. Or those teammates in Slack AI agents you can just at mention, like a colleague to ask for updates, draft text, even just banter with, supposedly.
Yeah.
Or AI coding tools that leave comments on your code changes directly in GitHub, using the same format as a human reviewer would. It fits right in.
What makes those work better?
It feels more natural, like a back and forth.
Yeah.
The AI has more context from the workflow. You get quicker feedback. You can iterate faster. And crucially, there's no separate AI mode you have to jump into and out of.
So the AI button is like clippy, a transitional phase.
That's the argument, yeah. A necessary step, perhaps. But the future is likely more integrated, more contextual AI assistance that feels like a helpful partner, not just a button you press.
Makes sense. And really quickly, the last piece was about event storming those workshop sticky notes, the underestimated power of the red and white ones.
Right. Event storming maps out business processes with stickies. Orange ones for events get all the glory. But red ones, hot spots for uncertainty or disagreement, and white ones, notes for assumptions or decisions, are super powerful.
How so? What do they actually do for the workshop?
Hotspots are amazing because they stop meetings getting stuck. Instead of arguing about something nobody knows the answer to yet, you put up a red sticky, acknowledge the uncertainty, define next steps, and move on. Keeps the momentum.
Okay, so you don't grind to a halt.
Exactly. And notes capture agreements or key context. So you don't have the same debate 3 weeks later during implementation because someone forgot what was decided. It's a simple record.
Helps even if key people aren't there.
Definitely. You can use the hotspots to show a busy manager exactly where their input is needed, focus their limited time on the specific unknowns. It makes uncertainty visible and actionable.
It sounds like it changes the culture around uncertainty, too. Makes it okay to say, I don't know yet.
That's the biggest thing, I think. It fosters a culture where identifying uncertainty isn't failure, it's valuable information. It encourages teams to actively seek out the unknowns. A small thing, using red and white stickies intentionally, but a profound impact on collaboration.
Interesting. A simple tool, big effect.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, a real deep dive. AI persuasion, Bluesky's vision, experts versus novices, AI algorithms, scamfluencers, Netflix ads, neurocomplexity, the programmer's burden, the Zizians,
Wow.
and better AI UX.
It has been quite the journey through this curation, and you really see the threads connecting them: technology's pace, human adaptation, the potential, and the peril.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with those big questions, doesn't it? As AI gets better at influencing us, woven more deeply into our lives,
Yeah.
how do you maintain your critical thinking, your agency?
Or maybe, in this complex world of tech and competing ideas, where do we find reliable ways to make sense of it all, to navigate what's coming?
Definitely things to ponder. Hopefully, this dive sparked some thoughts for you, the listener. If anything particularly caught your interest, maybe dig a little deeper into those areas.
Agreed. Always more to learn.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Episode sources: AI Reality Check. We directly compare the persuasion capabilities of a frontier large language model, LLM, Claude Sonnet 3.5, against incentivized human persuaders in an interactive, real-time conversational quiz setting. How fast can algorithms advance capabilities? Human at the center. Experts have it easy. The underestimated power of hotspots and notes in event storming. There should be no AI button. Neurocomplexity and burnout. Perimenopause and autism and due to your ADHD. The curse of knowing how, or fixing everything blog. Emerging tech, real impact. Bluesky is plotting a total takeover of the social internet. Digital safety and ethics. How to win followers and Scamfluence people. The delirious, violent, impossible true story of the Zizians. Brand stewardship and visibility. Netflix touts 94 million monthly active users on its ads tier as it gets up to speed. Global tech politics. No articles explicitly focused on this category in the provided sources.